Acha Kossack, Chapter 1, by Andrew L. Productions. Peewah squawked. Acha Kossack looked over at the companion riding on top of their shoulder. The parrot-like creature couldn't articulate words, but Acha always knew exactly what Peewah was saying. This particular shriek was a warning. The creature then craned his neck and cocked his head in disbelief. Acha looked down at the unlit torch in their left hand. The scent of kerosene permeated their nostrils. Acha pulled out a lighter, but Peewah squawked again. The creature's ornithic cry prompted Acha to pause. For a moment, Acha felt doubt. They heard the warnings of the tribal elders, humans and gargoyles alike. They mustn't cause trouble. They mustn't bring attention to the tribe. Confronting the government could spark a war the tribe would inevitably lose. But something had to be done. For over 400 years, European colonizers had invaded Canada, claiming the land for their own and murdering and displacing the people who had lived there for millennia. And to add insult to genocide, 12 years ago, the British began enlisting indigenous people to fight in the Great World War. At the time, Acha remembered saying goodbye to their human brothers who went away to Germany never to return. It felt so unfair, but Acha was too young and too confused to do anything about it. Acha had spent much of his childhood and adolescence feeling confused. He was born a gargoyle male, but over time he had realized he was not like the other boys in the tribe. Acha was both ice and fire, masculine and feminine, often feeling as if he were being ripped apart by the conflicting impulses inside of him. Both his spirit and body seemed to develop in different directions. But the tribal elders explained that this was not a cause for fear, but for celebration. Acha was blessed as a being of two spirits. He was composed of spiritual elements of both men and women. They told him that beings of two spirits often had special gifts or had a sight beyond sight. But for years, Acha did not feel blessed. He felt confused and torn. No one else in the tribe was like him. He felt at odds with everyone, even his closest friend, Yellowtop. Acha only felt at peace when he was alone in the forest. But as the elders had predicted, he began to develop gifts beyond those of ordinary humans and gargoyles. And as his connection to living creatures grew, Acha slowly began to not only accept who he really was, but to embrace it. In fact, Acha realized that he was not really even a he. He was more of a they, a being of two spirits. But as they stared at the sign that read, Ontario Christian School for Indians, Acha's two spirits were completely aligned. Confusion was replaced by steely resolve. Acha's tail whipped around and knocked the sign down. But the school building itself remained. It was pristine and freshly painted. White, of course. Acha pulled out the lighter. "Stay back, Peewah." The creature flapped its wings and flew off of Acha's shoulder. Acha braced for another diatribe of crowing and shrieks. "Peewah, I know you're worried about me, but this is something—" "Acha Kossack!" Acha turned around and saw the tall, rugged physique of Yellowtop gliding down towards them. His mahogany skin perfectly contrasted with his long, bright blonde hair, which flowed down past his shoulders. Yellowtop folded up his wings and approached Acha. "Acha, you can't do this! They know!" Yellowtop's betrayal was a dagger piercing Acha's heart. Their longing gaze turned into a glare. "You didn't tell your grandmother, did you?" Yellowtop swallowed a lump in his throat and averted his gaze to the ground. Acha felt a wave of rage crash down. They had told Yellowtop their plans in confidence. But despite being the strongest in the tribe, Yellowtop lacked Acha's courage and convictions. Nevertheless, Archer knew they couldn't very well spark a revolution and then run and hide in the rookery. But as they looked at Yellowtop, Archer couldn't help but feel angry. But anger was merely a fig leaf of an excuse. So much more was bubbling underneath. "You're too eager for the council's approval," Archer said. "There is wisdom in their words." Archer didn't dispute that fact, but the council was old, complacent, and borderline complicit. They had become too accustomed to surrendering to the government's demands in the name of avoiding conflict. Now the government wanted to round up the human children and indoctrinate them with their beliefs. The line had to be drawn here. If the children didn't know the ancient ways, then the tribe had no future. "You've seen the newspapers. Their banks are collapsing and their governments are impotent. Now is the time." "To do what? We're outnumbered. And they have guns." Peewah flew over and landed on Yellowtop's shoulder, and he began squawking in agreement. Archer's eyes rolled up in annoyance, and they turned to approach the white school building. Yellowtop grabbed Archer's arm. Archer spun around. Their eyes met. But Archer gave Yellowtop an icy stare, daring the larger gargoyle to use his strength to stop them. And as Archer expected, Yellowtop's eyes went to the ground, and he released Archer's arm. The two-spirited gargoyle approached the school, stopping right in front of the green wooden door, half expecting Yellowtop or Peewah to make one final plea to turn back. But no such admonition came. Archer hesitated for a moment, steadied their grip on the torch, and stepped inside. Acha Kossack knew the school would be empty, and yet still expected some form of resistance upon entering. But the one-room building was suspiciously quiet. Each step they took creaked against the wooden floor. A large elevated wooden desk was seated at the back of the building, with a black stove positioned right next to the teacher's desk. The school was jam-packed with 5 rows of wooden desks for the students. The chairs looked so hard and uncomfortable, and yet somehow very orderly. The school seemed somehow precise and formal, yet disconnected from the outside world. There were no tools, no places for animals, or even pictures of animals. The walls were wooden, bare, and white. Archer concluded this place was more like a prison than an institution for learning. Archer approached the teacher's desk. On top of it sat 2 books and something else. A photograph. Archer had never seen one before. They picked it up and examined it. It was a white woman sitting outside of a building, different from this one. She was smiling, but the Indian children surrounding her were not. The photo would be the first to burn. Then came the books, whose pages were easily consumed by the flames. Archer picked up the flaming book and tossed it across the room. They held up the torch to the walls, and the walls began to crackle as the flames transferred from the torch. Archer felt a sense of wonder as the fire rose and began to engulf the room. Archer marched out of the burning school triumphant, letting out a warrior's cry loud enough to wake the ancestors. But their sense of pride deflated when they saw the old gargoyle standing there. Like her grandson, Nana Yellowtop had dark mahogany skin with long blonde hair, which remained a vibrant hue despite her advanced age. Her body was decrepit, but her gaze was eternal. Archer looked right at the tribal elder, trying to maintain an air of confidence, but Archer could feel it collapsing inside. "Acha Kossack, what have you done?" Archer tried to remain defiant. Nana Yellowtop. Even her name was tainted by outsiders. Decades ago, one of the humans had seen her father in flight and had given him the nickname Old Yellowtop. And in order to make peace, he had adopted the name as his own and given it to his children. It was yet another sign of assimilation to human customs. But as Archer stared at the elderly gargoyle's bright blonde hair, they didn't dare vocalize this thought. Nevertheless, Archer retorted. "I did what you and the chieftains refused to do."
"You've declared war on the white man."
"No, they declared war on us."
"Violence will only beget more violence."
"I have shed no blood. No one was harmed."
"The humans will retaliate."
"And we will resist." Nana Yellowtop looked into Archer's eyes, as if she could read their two-spirited soul. Archer attempted to meet her look with a stern sense of resolution, but they found themselves suddenly wanting to look away.
"You will stand before the council, and you shall be judged."
She turned her back to Archer and walked away. Archer looked at Yellowtop, their eyes pleading for acceptance and understanding. But Yellowtop merely followed behind his grandmother. Archer wanted to call out, to explain, but they realized that wasn't the truth. Archer just didn't want to be alone, and as if sensing their thoughts, Peewah gave a final squawk. Was it concern or regret, or even a final "I told you so"? Archer couldn't tell. But Peewah flapped his wings and followed after the blonde gargoyles. Archer stood alone. They could feel the warmth from the flames caressing their face as a cool autumn breeze titillated their wings. Archer allowed a smile to creep across their face. But now what? What if the state of Ontario just built another school? And the council? Archer wasn't sure of what punishment they would mete her out. But they knew whatever it was, it would be weak. They'll probably just banish me to the woods for a few days, or make me clean out the horse stable. But what if they're right? What if I've brought them to the brink of an armed conflict? My people aren't ready. But if an armed conflict comes, neither am I. The gifts of two spirits had given Acha Kossack an uncanny connection to living things, particularly when they were near the forest. They could feel so many of the creatures, great and small. Archer knew that life was precious, and it should be protected at all costs. But pangs of fear began to gnaw at Archer's core. They turned around, but they were all alone, with only the burning building for company. Archer closed their eyes and took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. They needed access. In addition to their connection with living things, Archer's gift of two spirits could on occasion allow them to see glimpses of gargoyles in faraway places. They could perceive premonitions of the future or shadows of the past. But Archer had no ability to control when these gifts occurred. So they breathed and allowed the two spirits to exist. They stood, existing outside a burning building in the forest. Archer exhaled, then inhaled again, allowing their spirits to ascend. Archer could feel their connection pulsate throughout Ontario. They took another breath and allowed their spirits to expand, seeking access and connection to another place. Acha Kossack could feel their spirits expanding and existing all over North America. The two spirits soared. Yet Archer remained alone. Their eyes opened, and at first, they noticed the white walls were turning to soot. But the pangs of loneliness began gnawing again. Even the forest was quiet tonight. Archer heard something. A voice. Is someone inside? Archer took one step into the burning building, but the flames singed their wings. They instinctively leapt back, but they approached again and peered inside. Hello? Is anybody in there? But Archer saw only flames. They peered inside the entranceway to make sure no one was inside. Archer knew that burning the school was an act of defiance, but Archer had never considered the possibility that someone might be harmed. Archer took another step towards the entrance, but a piece of the roof collapsed into the middle of the school. Archer jumped back again, but the voice was still calling. They took a deep breath and ran into the school. Archer stood in the hell of their own creation, trying to use their wings as a shield, while the burning wood scalded their feet. A wooden beam fell from the roof, striking the wing first before hitting Archer's back. Archer fell to the ground. The searing pain in their wings and back was excruciating. Archer knew a wing was likely broken, but Archer could barely breathe. There was so much smoke. As the black fog and flames encompassed the school, Archer was able to take one deep breath on the ground before forcing themselves to stand. Archer limped towards the teacher's desk, but no one was there. They took one last look around, but then leapt out the back door, the cool grass now soothing their burned feet. Their wings still felt as if they were on fire. Then Archer looked and saw the right one was indeed broken. Archer collapsed onto the ground. They drew their wings into their body and rolled around to smother the flames. It seemed as if all of Archer's skin was burned. They were in pain, and Archer realized it was a long way until morning. But as Archer concentrated, they still heard the voice. They looked back into the burning school, and the wild, untamed flames were now dancing with purpose. They undulated from one side of the school to the next. Archer squinted and could just about make out an image. But the flames continued to twirl and came into focus. Archer saw someone. She looked like a gargoyle, but she was different, not of the natural world. She was great and yet terrible. Fear pulsated through Archer's spirits, the way a shiver would down a spine. Archer watched in amazement as the flames created a dreadful presence, and that presence reached out and called to the two spirits. Acha Kossack felt the urge to call back, not in English, but rather in the language of his people. As Archer's spirits sensed her presence, they realized that they must name her, to call her for what she was. There was only one word for that. Archer called her the one who was both awesome and terrifying, astonishing, yet dangerous, a vicious power dwelling amongst mortals. She was one who could pour out death upon the multitudes as easily as she could dispense true justice. Archer uttered that ancient, hallowed word. Marci Manito. And as Acha Kossack uttered it, they could see her visage clearly in the conflagration of fire. She was no longer an ethereal mystery, but a corporeal warrior. She was strong, determined, and unyielding. But as Archer's spirits mingled with hers, Archer perceived something else. She is in danger. This has been Acha Kossack by Andrew L. Productions. It was performed by Ryan Lawton. If you've enjoyed this broadcast, please be sure to subscribe and give us a like. And if you're in a position to support this and other projects, please visit our Patreon page, Andrew Creates. It really helps us out a lot. Thank you.